Assalamu alaikum, brothers and sisters. Welcome back to the Divine Reality course. We're going over the implications of atheism section. And so thus far we've highlighted that it's not an argument, but it's a very powerful foundational point considering the society and the world that we live in today. And it creates that fertile ground for all of these other arguments that we're going to be covering to take root. So it's a very powerful point. So far we've covered the implications of atheism, and we've also highlighted how atheism cannot provide ultimate meaning. It cannot give you purpose or tell you what the ultimate purpose of your existence is. So what have people tried to do? This is what I want to sort of touch upon now. What have people, especially since the 17th and 18th centuries, tried to do to bridge this gap, to fill this hole, this void which has emerged from people turning away from God? How have they tried to deal with this? The existentialists, Jean-Paul Sartre, Nietzsche, Camus, Kierkegaard, and the list goes on, all of these guys, they were the existentialist philosophers. And existentialism, or I think it's called continental philosophy, became very popular, especially in the 18th and especially in the 19th century, because of all of the wars that were taking place and the evil that was being perceived by human beings. And especially considering the fact that people are moving away from religion and God in this time in history. On top of this, seeing all of the calamity and the bloodshed and all of the stuff taking place due to the wars that were taking place, people started to ask the question, what is this life all about? How do we make sense of it? What is the meaning of my life? And this led to the popularity of these existentialists. And all of them, one credit you have to give them, what all of them did in their own way was they first acknowledged, they swallowed the frog, as you'd say. They acknowledged, okay, the absence of God, there is no ultimate meaning to life. Most of these existentialist philosophers were atheists as well, barring a few. They said there's no ultimate meaning to life. However, that's where their philosophy began. Now they were like, okay, however, there is no meaning to life, but we don't stop there. We don't become nihilists. We have to find meaning for ourselves. We need to define our own meaning. We have to create our own meaning, right? And some of these philosophers went down the route of responsibility, talking about the role of responsibility for human beings, living a responsible life. Some went down the route of living an ethical life. Others, such as Nietzsche, tried to present a philosophy of a complete human being, the Übermensch, or the Superman in his philosophy, which was this self-made man or self-made woman who developed these powerful characteristics and elevated themselves from this turmoil of nihilism through creating themselves, essentially. Now, the problem with this approach, and although this approach is still being promoted in some ways, and you have some new age public intellectuals, academics such as Jordan Peterson, and one of the things he's currently doing is he's almost taking a new spin on the existentialist philosophy. And he talks a lot about responsibility and living upright lives and doing good and being responsible and all of these things. And it's appealing. People are turning back to this because they've had quite a big gap since these type of philosophies were prevalent, till the new atheism took over and started to push its own type of ideology. So it's becoming popular, but the problem with it is it's not a definitive ultimate answer. Making up meaning for yourself, can be fun, can be meaningful in some way in itself, meaning that you've got something to do now and you're trying to elevate yourself from this lowly position. But at the end of the day, one quickly realizes that all of these grand ideas about, being honorable and having upright values and being responsible, all of these amazing virtues and aspiring towards them, it's just something you're telling yourself, meaning that it's something you're making up for yourself. It's not intrinsically, it has no value. There's no ought that presses on one to actually act in this way or elevate oneself in this way. Why? Because at the end of the day, if you really sit down and think about it, if everything is an accident, if everything is random and has happened by chance, and there is no meaning behind anything, and you live once and you're going to die, well then what is the point of telling yourself that you should have higher values and do this, X, Y, and Z? It may sound good, but it's futile. It's empty. It has no intrinsic meaning behind giving yourself these meanings, right? It's just something you make up. Like children play the game, they play dress up every so often. It's what you're doing. You're telling yourself, you're making up meaning for yourself. In other words, you're lying to yourselves. Why not? Why can't someone turn around and say, well, the meaning I want to give my life is I want to be a rapist and I want to be the most virtuous, best rapist in the world, for example, hypothetically here. I mean, someone could say that from that perspective because that's what they're making up for themselves. Now, if someone turns around and says, well, no, that's not good. Well, how do you know that's not good? How do you ground good? And that goes, we'll discuss this in the moral argument later. But anyone can make up their own meaning. And it could be anything. It doesn't have to be what these existentialist philosophers said. So ultimately, it's just you're making things up and it doesn't work in the long term. It may work for a while, but eventually you'll get around to it and you'll understand, well, I'm just making things up. How is this actually giving my life true meaning, in any significant way, other than just allowing me to keep going, because it's just a part of my nature to keep moving forward and trying to develop myself and improve myself. So that's one problem that the existentialists faced. The postmodern response is, let's just accept it and face it. It's almost a nihilistic approach to it. It's a deconstructive approach, which is whatever, because what postmodernism the postmodernist does is it's like they show the middle finger to the modernists and say, look, to hell with your all of this defined way of life and all of these ideas and principles that you put in place and all of these objectives you've given us of worldly utopia and progress and all of this stuff. They actually follow through with the outcome of denying God, which is nothing. There is no truth. Truth is how you want to define it. Truth is what you want to make it, right? It's just and they deconstruct every sphere of life. It's this deconstruction. It's this movement of deconstruction. Okay, what is truth? It's as I want to define it. Truth is for me what I want to make it. And it's like there is no certainty anymore. Anything goes, literally, right? So from this perspective, they in most cases they acknowledge there is no ultimate meaning to life, and they try to be okay with this. So it is a type of nihilism. It's almost there is no meaning, and I'm okay with it. It's empty, right? And I'm just here, and I'm intelligent, and my role is just to strip everything down and break everything up into small parts of understanding, and just remove any bit of sanity in a way that was left with the advent of modernity, right? Because the modernists, what they did was they although they turned away from God, they still tried to replace that void now with other things, other goals, other purpose, and they were still very structured in their approach. But the postmodernist is like, I'm going to deconstruct and rip up everything because it's all a lie. It hasn't come true. The promises haven't been fulfilled. If anything, we've seen more destruction, more chaos, more wars, and it's just whatever now. Anything goes. It's some pick and mix culture now. Then you have the nihilists who say there is no meaning of life. Let's just find a way of ignoring this problem, right? Let's just find a way of ignoring it completely. And this is where you can call it hedonic nihilism comes in, which is, as human beings, they think, okay, there is no meaning to life, but I know that I feel pleasure. I know that I feel happiness when I do certain things. I feel pleasure when I do certain things. I enjoy myself when I do certain things. Let me strive after those things. So their highest value becomes attaining as much pleasure as they can, maximizing pleasure, right? So they are just out there, just do whatever you want. As long as you're having fun and you're not harming anyone else, just go have fun, enjoy yourself, right? So that's their approach. However, the problem with that is that eventually you're going to burn out, right? There's only so much you could do. You can either kill yourself from overindulging, or you're going to burn out because these things are slowly going to stop satisfying you. There's only so many times you can sleep around and derive pleasure. There's only so many drugs you can do before you end up poisoning yourself and killing yourself. And it's just human, the way we're made up physiologically. Whenever you do something that's pleasurable, you get a dopamine response, right? So the first time someone does drugs, they do a small amount, they get a huge kick, huge dopamine release. But the next time, each time you do it after that, the dopamine response is less and less and less, and you need to take more and more and more, right? To the point, and this is why everyone's chasing that high, that first high that they got, but they never can achieve it again. And some people end up killing themselves, overdosing, right? So, and that applies to anything in this world. If you chase after anything and you try to overindulge yourselves with all of these things, and you keep running after it, over time, you're just going to burn out. You're going to burn out, and you're going to be at square one again. completely empty and depressed and anxious and not knowing what to do with your life. What do the new atheists tend to do? As I mentioned already, what they try to do is they try to focus on the meaning in life as opposed to the meaning of life, right? So, and they're very so crafty with this sometimes in their interviews. They'll be asked the question of the meaning of life and they'll answer on the meaning in life, right? So essentially they are taking a bit from the existentialist camp, which is, okay, give themselves some sort of significant meaning. Although, if you were a philosophical naturalist and a Darwinist on top of it, which most philosophical naturalists may be Darwinists as well, well, then you'd have to take the line of survival. The purpose of life is to survive and to reproduce, to pass on your genes. Now, I mean, I don't need to say more on that. I mean, if one was to really, with passion and drive, follow this ambition, what that would mean, what they would become in society. So you guys can connect the dots there. So all of these attempts, modern attempts to bridge the gap of meaning have failed, and they continue to fail. The only way one is going to find ultimate meaning is through Islam. There is no other solution. Like I said, the question of meaning, ultimate meaning of life, is a religious question. And from a religious perspective, the domain of religion, Islam, is the only way of life, the only religion which is preserved and it's comprehensive, and it comprehensively addresses the question of meaning. So, brothers and sisters, a lot there for you to chew on, inshallah. When you're ready, move on to the next section.